like to introduce the deputy political leader of the PDP, Dr. Faith B. Israel. Dr. B. Israel, I know we'll just want to get into the madness that happened in Parliament for a little bit. Give us your opinion as another politician. What do you make of the Parliament upon which you unfortunately have to depend on to fulfill Tobago autonomy?
So yesterday, good morning everyone, thank you so much for having me. So yesterday I did not see what was happening in the Parliament. We were actually quite busy trying to ensure that the Progressive Democratic Patriots truly, honestly, and carefully responded to the needs and the wants of Tobagonians. So listening to the clip this morning was actually the first I had seen or heard the clip. It is sad that that is what the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago has come to. And I can tell you from, even though I had not seen it yesterday, I looked at several comments from individuals on social media, and I don't know that anyone was pleased with what happened in our Parliament yesterday. I don't know that anyone was happy that this is what our elected and selected representatives dwindled down to yesterday. The other thing that I noticed yesterday was the fact that individuals' perception of who was wrong. Now, the reality is, I think everyone agreed that what happened should not have happened and what happened was wrong. But the perception of who to blame for what was wrong seemed to be very partisan. Yes. So those who were, on the side of the executive, they were very clear on who they thought should blame. Those who were on the side of the opposition were also very clear on who they thought should be blamed, and everyone very quickly took a very partisan view of the situation. Personally, I think it was all unfortunate, and it actually made me, having listened to this morning, made me appreciate, for example, a step that my organization, the Progressive Democratic Patriots, took on Wednesday, where we, in essence, all 15 potentially elected representatives, prospective candidates until nomination day at least, we all, in essence, signed a social contract with the people of Tobago, in essence letting them know from now that that kind of behavior that we experienced yesterday on all sides kind of thing. And, this is one of those times where repeating a Trumpian term, there's good on all sides and there's bad on all sides. I'm forced to repeat that kind of Trumpian term. We pledged to the people of Tobago that we will not ever behave in a manner that would bring, in essence, disrepute to ourselves, but primarily to the individuals who vote for us. I would actually like to read some of the tenets of that contract so that we get an understanding of how seriously we see this and how much we are trying our best to be as different to what we saw yesterday as possible. So, let me explain the situation. What we did, this is actually a physical contract that we had a lawyer look at, help us draft, ensure that it was worded in the legalese and that kind of thing. We also had an affidavit, commission of affidavit witness and sign as an official witness and stamp his stamp. We signed this in the large view of the public so that everyone knows that this is what happened. And we are going to have copies of this document as we go into the homes of those who we are asking to elect us, because there's also a space in the document for the constituent to sign on behalf of themselves and behalf of their families. So we agreed, and I would read it, to use regularly organized town hall meetings and modern technology to determine the consensus among the views of the constituents to any and all matters that affect your lives, to respect and represent the views of all majority and minority constituents in the electoral district and the island within the government of Tobago, to live in the strictest harmony and closest collaboration and connection with constituents, to maintain continuous and unreserved communication with all constituents, to lead with diligence and honesty, and to have a zero tolerance on corruption, nepotism, and wastage, to responsibly use state resources and privileges, to give unconditional attention to and fight relentlessly for the community, business, family, and individual needs of every constituent. And finally, in all cases, to prefer the interests of one's constituent above one's own and share with all the benefits of being elected. This is what we signed it to, meaning we completely understand the task at hand, that this is not about us being an elected representative to walk away with the privileges, including parliamentary privilege, and to run with that, but to definitely and to quickly and to continually represent our district the way they want us to represent them, and that is with honor and pride. Unfortunately, what happened yesterday for the entire parliament was not what the people of Trinidad and Tobago elected or selected all of them to do.
Well, I will just say this. It was interesting to see that the government side of Parliament, the government bench, did not utter a single word throughout all the bacchanal. And we could only speculate as to if it was planned or if they just managed to all, they knew better to not add to the confusion and the madness. But Keaton, thoughts?
Well, first of all, in relation to yesterday, so many opinions. First of all, as it relates to let's start off with the government side. They were absolutely silent throughout the entire process, throughout the entire proceedings. The opposition clearly came prepared. What their intended goal was, I'm not entirely sure. We know that they put forward the motion, but when the motion was being read by the Speaker of the House, at least the proceedings, she was continuously interrupted. Now, I do understand the point that the opposition was trying to raise. However, I disagree to the extent that they went about trying to do their business. Mm-hmm. Everybody came dressed in black, if you noticed, on the side of the opposition, declaring that it was the death of democracy. The leader of the House, who is also the chairman of the Electoral College, that's 𝑑𝑫𝑷'G 𝑺𝑶𝑚, she held her composure. But this is the thing. I'm no fan of the Speaker of the House. And yesterday was nothing new in relation to constantly cutting the mics of the opposition. That's nothing new. We've seen that before. So the comment made by the opposition member, Barry Panarath, in relation to they were elected, she wasn't. Understand what he was trying to prove. Now, it's disrespectful, but understand what he was trying to prove. He was essentially trying to, point out the bias of the speaker, at least from the viewpoint of the opposition. That's exactly what he was trying to point out. Yeah. You were essentially placed there by the People's National Movement government. You work for the government. That's really what he was trying to point out. So yes, it was a mess, but the opposition came prepared to put across a message. Whether or not I was successful, the opinions are divided and split on this. Opinions are really divided and split on this. What I'm curious to know from the opinion of Dr. B. Israel, how does the proceedings of yesterday and even before yesterday, over the last few weeks in relation to the Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Rowley, the President, the PSC, the motion brought forward by the opposition, and, possibly what's going to take place over the next month and a half, how does this affect the THE elections? Because many are suggesting, and I think it's actually quite an amazing opinion, that what the opposition was doing yesterday and what the opposition has been doing is essentially their part leading up to the THE elections.
The Tobago House of Assembly elections will be contested in Tobago by the People's National Movement. It will be contested by other smaller political parties, but most importantly, it will be contested by the Progressive Democratic Patriots. We are the ones who live on the island. We are the ones who have to experience what living on this island means, and we are the ones who have to contend with that. We are the ones who are going to decide how these elections are done in Tobago, and going back to the contract that we signed on Wednesday, we are the ones who are going to decide the tone of this election. Tobagonians have been telling us very, very clearly that they want an election based on issues. They want an election based on us letting them know what we are going to do to change their lives for the better. They do not want us to engage in any kind of bacchanal. They do not want us to engage in any kind of kankatang. They do not want us to engage in any of that. We have been listening to what Tobagonians are saying, and the Progressive Democratic Patriot is going to ensure that we contest this election using the tenets that we signed to, which is with respect, integrity, and focusing on issues. We have said on many occasions, and it continues to reign true, that the PDP is not aligned to any other political party in Trinidad or in Tobago. So what those other parties do in the parliament in Trinidad is what they choose to do in the parliament in Trinidad. And I would appreciate it if that does not get confuffled, or that does not get commingled with what is happening in Tobago, because the people in Tobago were not happy with what happened yesterday. And they are asking us as the Progressive Democratic Patriots to ensure that we do not ever go down that road, because that is not why they elected 6 of us in January, and that is not why they are going to elect many more of us in December.
Well, as we saw, it seems as though even if the UNC had a plan, it seems as though that the events managed to derail that plan. I would argue that their intent was probably not achieved. Even with their supporters, they might have achieved something that the supporters might like, but the actual achievement that they probably were setting out to do on a issue, with regards to the issue at hand, because now we're sidetracked to a whole other issue, and it seems as though now they've moved on to questioning the Prime Minister. As it stands with politics, to what extent do you think being a new party, I think people might fail to realize the PDP is not just a regurgitation of old faces under a new name. And you could argue that every party that we've had in Trinidad and Tobago has more or less been something to that extent. As far as I'm aware, the PDP is all new faces, now with an all-new social contract that might be one of the best attempts we've seen to move away from the sort of thing that we've decried on Talking Point. So do you think that your party is getting the just due on the fact that you don't have these historical baggage and ties to weigh you down and to suggest that, no, this is all talk and it's going to be business as usual eventually?
Exactly, and I think you've hit the nail on the head, because we contested our first election in 2017. The party was actually registered a couple months before that in 2017. And in that election, we were able to gain 2 of the 12 seats in the Tobago House of Assembly. So fast forward to 2020, you would recognize that when you look at the data from the 2020 August general election, even though our party did not win either the Tobago East or Tobago West seats, when you look at the number of votes garnered by the Progressive Democratic Patriots in that August election, we actually were the third largest political organization in the country. The PNM being the largest, of course, because they won, the UNC being the second largest, they are in the opposition. But when you look at the overall votes, the PDP came third in that ranking. And that really is because the people of Tobago have actually been waiting patiently for an organization that is exactly like ours. One that is willing to do things differently, one that is willing to pull in individuals who you would normally not see in a political sphere. As a matter of fact, when I started, I actually stopped. I did not like the term politician. I'm not sure I like the term politician now. But one of the things we started talking about was the fact that we were technocratic politicians, because we were people who were not just the community favorites, but we are people who knew what they were talking about and were willing to do what we need to do. And we have the technical capacity, for example, to manage a division or manage a ministry. And I think that is why the Tobago population gave us the chance in January, because many of the commentators, particularly many of the commentators in Trinidad, assumed that we were going to lose badly, bigly, to use another Trumpian term, in January. But we knew we were talking to the people on the ground, and the people on the ground have been telling us that they want something different. They want something real, and that is what the Progressive Democratic Patriots is bringing to this table. Different and real, and yes, not just regurgitated old faces, old thoughts, or old ideas. We are moving into the future, and we would like to take Tobago, and dare I say Trinidad and Tobago, into the future.
Dr. B. Israel, can I just ask you, what is the PDP's viewpoint or stance as it relates to the entire imbroglio?
Could you repeat that question? I didn't hear it.
What is the PDP's view, their opinion, their stance as it relates to this entire issue? What's taking place right now? Well, what took place in Parliament and the entire issue at hand in relation to, I guess, the state of democracy, the imbroglio between the president, the PSC, the prime minister, the opposition leader. What is the PDP's opinion on it?
Our opinion is that what happens in the parliament now seems to not resonate with what is happening on the ground. What does that mean? For example, when we look at the discussion that happened in September, I think, about the Tobago Autonomy Bill, I think it was on this very program where I said that it was sad that we were having a full discussion in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago about Tobago autonomy, and the Tobago voices were not being heard. And I think that remains the same here, because we are now having a situation where we have, as they say, the horses are trampling, the grass is getting trampled, and those people on the ground who need all of the resources, need all our leaders to be functioning in a particular way, are suffering because we are not getting that kind of representation. So all of this is very, very disturbing, and the individuals we are speaking to, and we represent those who meet us at funerals and those who meet us, by the shop. All of this that happened yesterday again shows that those people in the parliament in Trinidad do not represent the wants and wishes of the people on the ground, and particularly the people in Tobago.
Well, we're more or less out of time, so I will have to cut us off here. I will say this, though. You might not like the term politician. Now, it all depends on how you define it. With regards to how politics is practiced, you could say globally, let's not just single out TNT. I can understand why you don't want to be associated with the term. With regards to the actual business of politics, and you could say communicating on relevant issues to the public, negotiating with your fellow politician, I do believe that a lot of the quote-unquote professional politicians in the country could do well to follow your example when it comes to communicating skills. We would be quite a bit better off if more politicians were able to speak on the issues openly and clearly as you do. So I think, our politicians could make that of their will, because I myself am quite, unfortunately, exasperated by the lack of clear and open communication and transparency. But we'll have to leave that there. It is time for news on the hour. I'd like to thank Dr. Faith B. Israel once again for coming on the show. You could see her here every Friday where she gives her opinion on both what's going on in Tobago as well as some of the important current events of the day. But we have to break for news on the hour on WESN Content Capital. When we come back, we'll open up the phone lines. So stay tuned. You're watching Talking Points.